The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. A surprise boost for retailers as food sales see the biggest jump since the start of the pandemic, with a big surge in the flavour of the moment, rhubarb apparently. Germany prepares to go to the polls. We'll be looking at what's at stake for Europe's biggest economy. Plus, the row that's been distilled in the whisky world over whether English whisky can be labelled as single malt, with Scottish MPs calling it sabotage. Very good morning on this Friday, Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. We're going to start with that surprise boost for shops as sales exceeded expectations, with the biggest rise in food sales in 5 years. It suggests that consumers have been happy to spend despite the weak economic outlook. Well, according to the Office for National Statistics, retail sales rose in January, up 1.7% month on month. It's the first growth since August and follows a fall of 0.6% in the key shopping month of December. The biggest rise was food shopping sales, which were up 5.6%, the biggest since March 2020 when COVID-19 lockdowns began. The ONS says that shops across the food and drink sector benefited, with supermarkets, butchers, bakers and alcohol and tobacco shops all reporting strong trade. Well, let's speak to Daniela Haythorne. She's Senior Market Analyst at Capital.com. Daniela, as always, good to see you this morning. Thank you. Finally, some good news.
Yeah, as you say, that upbeat retail sales figure, and it comes at the end of a week where we've also seen other data for the UK. We've seen hot inflation, CPI rising back up to 3%, which isn't great news for the UK economy right now, and also strong wage growth. Again, you could be taking that on the front that it's good news, wages are growing, but that puts pressure on the economy as well. And the same with retail sales, as you was mentioning, the biggest rise, or one of the biggest rise we've seen, is actually in food sales. And you have to question, why is that? Why are people spending more on their food bill? It's not only price increases, but also in terms of the increase in retail sales, it's the fact that people are potentially going less to eat out. That could affect the restaurant industry, that could affect the growth in that sector, and that could have an impact on the economy as well. So on the preface, it looks like it's really good numbers, but when you look at the broader picture, it still shows quite a weak economy in the UK.
Yeah, that's my concern, that actually this will show that people are going out a lot less, eating at home. Weather wasn't particularly good in January. It was quite cold, wasn't it? So, yes, good news for the supermarkets maybe, but not necessarily for bars and restaurants. And actually, it's not been a good month either for clothes retailers, has it? With their sales down again. They've had a pretty tough year or so.
Yeah, as you say, we've had kind of like the economy's been performing in really great in some areas, and we've had these patchy areas of growth. But in general, if we're looking at the figures, and as I said, it's not only about the retail sales that we've seen today, we also saw that hotter inflation, that wage growth. The Bank of England is now being pushed back into a corner once again as to what are they going to be able to do? Can they continue to cut rates as much as forecasted this year? And we know expectations have been pushed back this week for the next cut. So essentially, it's not a great economic environment to be in, and it's also limiting the amount of action the Bank of England can take, even though they voted, two members voted for a 50 basis point cut at the meeting earlier this month. So again, we've been pushed back into a situation where we need to balance growth and inflation and monetary policy, and it's getting trickier and trickier by the day.
And we can just pause there, Daniela, because clearly that's a bit of a mixed picture when it comes to retail sales, but also it must be said that we've got a bit of a mixed picture when it comes to borrowing figures today for the Chancellor, because they show the very fact that the government notched up a record surplus in January. That's clearly good news, with public sector net borrowing of 15.4 billion, the biggest monthly rise that we've seen in that surplus since records began in 1993. But, and this is the key point, it is less than the OBR forecast in October. Daniela is back with us again. A mixed picture in the sense of, yes, it's a surplus. It's the biggest surplus on record, but it's below expectations.
Yeah, again, you've got to look at this figure in two parts. One, as you say, public finances are in a better position than they were. As you say, that the public purse, as you may, is now backing the positive for the first time in a long time. But generally in January, we do see the public finances improve because we have annual tax bills from the previous financial year that are paid. But as you were saying, this was below expectations and below what the government had budgeted for this year. So again, below expectations, but also we've seen that borrowing has actually surged in this government so far. In the last 10 months, we've seen borrowing increase or be above about £12 million more than what they had originally expected. And again, that puts into question and pressures this government. What are they going to do at their next announcement in March, at the next fiscal statement at the end of March? Markets still expect that they will either have to increase taxes or they're going to have to cut spending, because clearly that wiggle room they gave themselves is now starting to erode.
OK, Daniela, really appreciate, as always, your insights this morning. Thank you very much indeed, Daniela Haythorne, there joining us this morning. And just on those figures, because it is fascinating, this on borrowing, clearly January was a good month in terms of the surplus with tax intake, but we still did borrow £118 billion between April and January, and that is 11.6 billion more than the previous year, and it is 12.8 billion more than the OBR forecast, i.e. we are, over the space of the year, despite how good January is, borrowing more money than we ever have, and that is not clearly good news for Rachel Reeves. Right, let's return to those retail sales, because they have given us the snapshot, hopefully, of how the economy is doing with the latest consumer confidence survey from GfK. It shows that there are some green shoots of optimism in February, but household views on the economy are still lower than they were a year ago. Let's get more on this with Neil Bellamy, Consumer Insights Director at GfK. Thank you, Neil. Just first of all, give us an insight into what the confidence survey is showing this month.
Yeah, so as you say, we've seen a rise, but it's only gone up by 2 points. So it's at minus 20 compared with minus 22 that it had in January. And minus 20 is essentially what we've seen as the average over the last 18 months. So we've seen some months going up, some going down. And it's when you get into the detail of what's going on that can make quite a difference. So you were kind of alluding to it, but it's about people's personal financial situation over the next 12 months. That's where we've seen the biggest improvement. That's gone up by 4 points. So people think from their own point of view, what's the money in their pocket? Perhaps it's looking a bit better for the year ahead. And definitely something like the interest rate cut would have encouraged people to think that way. Daniela also mentioned around the wage rises being above inflation. So there's certainly some people right now who are feeling the benefit of those things.
They are, and we also know that people are saving more money. It doesn't seem that there's a lack of money. It's the lack of confidence, isn't it? That people are concerned that actually things won't pick up, if you like, this year.
Absolutely. You mentioned about the economic outlook, and yes, that's gone up by a few points, but actually it's lower than it was a year ago. So whatever's happened over the last 12 months, people aren't thinking any better in terms of what comes next to the economy. And in terms of saving, we have a separate savings index. That's at a near record high of plus 30. And you might think, oh, that's great, people are saving money, but actually it's more like they're saving it for a rainy day. They've been a bit scarred over the last few years of everything that's happened, affecting their finances. So they really just want to make sure they've got money to hand for whatever lies ahead.
And just on this, what are people telling you? Why is there a lack of confidence? Is it the fact that interest rates might not fall quite as quickly? Is it just the global situation? Is it that maybe the government's talked down the economy too much? What are they saying?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to how they're feeling in themselves, what they're seeing all around them. And yes, we can say there are better pay rises going on, but that's not impacting everybody. Some people are getting virtually no pay rises at all. At the same time, inflation keeps going up. So it's yes, it's gone down again, but we can see it's on the rise. The prospects are it's only going to get worse. And because of that, there's a feeling that interest rates are not going to get cut anytime soon. So people are not feeling the benefit. You hear extra news about, well, it could be that gas and electric prices are going back up. So there's a big part of the population who are really suffering. I think especially those on lower income, they can't afford to be saving money for a rainy day. They need it now to pay for their gas and electric bills. So world events can have an impact, but it's really how people are feeling about their everyday lives.
OK, Neil, interesting stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Neil Bellamy there from GfK. Thank you. Let's bring you up to date with some of the rest of the business stories on this Friday morning. And some sub 4% mortgage deals will disappear from the market from today when Santander UK pulls some products from sales just over a week after they launched. It comes amid changing market conditions. It said the decision has followed an increase in 5-year swap rates, which are used by lenders to price mortgages across the past week. Plans to triple the number of international passengers at St Pancras Station could open up new cross-channel routes to France, Germany, Italy and Switzerland. London St Pancras' High Speed hopes the redesigned terminal will attract new railway operators to compete with Eurostar. Getlink, the French operator of the Channel Tunnel, said eventually services could even reach as far as Milan. Now, supermarkets have reported that demand for rhubarb has surged by 200% compared with the same time last year amid a boom in rhubarb-flavoured products. Tesco said out-of-season forced rhubarb, made to grow earlier than it normally is under warmth and darkness, as you can see on your screen, is widely considered to be more tender and sweeter. Tesco's supplier Place UK said demand for forced rhubarb has soared by more than 170% since 2019. And you can get more on that story. It is really interesting. Apparently, that Tesco sells some 40 different flavours of rhubarb in terms of hand gels, teas, obviously in sweets and confectionery. More on that story, I say, on our money block. Just scan the QR code on your screen to access it on the Sky News app. Indeed, the rest of the Money News. Now, there's been a bit of a row distilling in the whisky world. Westminster MPs have been discussing whether English whisky can be labelled as single malt. Now, that's provoked anger in Scotland, with one SNP MP calling it sabotage of Scotland's most important exports. Well, let's speak to Morag Garden, Chief Executive of the English Whisky Guild. Very good morning to you. Just talk us through, if you can, impartially, if you can, it must be said, what is the difference between a single malt whisky in Scotland as opposed to what you guys would like to see in England?
Firstly, can I just sort of say that today, English Whisky Guild is celebrating this week because our GI has gone out for consultation. So we're one step closer to securing our national geographical indication, and that's going to give us that legal protection, and then that will be the last of the UK nations to gain that. So that's really exciting for us. In terms of the difference, if I can maybe give you an example. So one of our members was a farmer first, then became a brewer, and is now an English whisky distiller. And all the barley in his single malt English whisky is grown by him, and it's on his farm, and it's done regeneratively. So he brews the wash, and then it travels 2 miles as the crow flies to the local village and his distillery. And the farm, the brewery, the distillery are all in the same parish. And he's 100% in control from the field where it's grown to the bottle where it's poured from. So this is the kind of difference, is that we are, as part of the GI, we're allowing companies to work collaboratively and in partnership with brewers to create these unique and distinct whiskies. Because yeah.
They are unique, there's no doubt about that. And, whiskey's made in lots of different countries around the world. But Scottish whisky is known around the world and is particularly valued. It's particularly valued for the UK. What do you then make when you hear the Scottish Whisky Association, for example, saying that this is sabotage, that you're undermining effectively what is a worldwide brand?
Well, actually, English whisky has won the globally renowned Crown, the world's best single malt whisky, twice in the last 3 years. So we're proud to be modern, small and growing globally, and we are world class.
Why do you need the term, those single malts? I don't get it. Why not operate on your own basis?
Single malt is actually a definition that's used across the globe and with other GIs in whisky nations.
Okay, so when they say it's sabotage, when they say that you're undermining the brand, you just think they're talking rubbish.
I mean, I'm still here today to talk about and celebrate English whiskey and our GI. Yeah.
Okay, but so you're not willing to engage then?
There's a consultation process, and it's run by DEFRA, and that's the whole reason for the consultation, is to make sure that interested parties like the Scotch Whisky Association can feed in their concerns, their oppositions, and then that goes through that formal process to be reviewed, assessed, and at the end, hopefully we'll achieve our legal definition.
Okay, I mean, I see you were only established in 2022. You've got 26 member distilleries. I mean, you are a very small percentage, I think, of overall sales. Scotch makes up 99% of all single malts consumed in the UK and 93% internationally. What I'm trying to get at here is, the argument from Scotland is you're damaging a worldwide brand. I know you're not willing to engage with that. Is your expectation, your hope, that with this new recognition that you'll be able to increase sales?
Yeah, I mean, for English whiskey, a GI is crucial because it's going to ensure that quality, authenticity, and market differentiation. So it's creating those common standards for English whiskey, which is going to be that quality mark for consumers. But it's also going to be recognised across the globe in other countries. And we definitely want to work with the Department of Business and Trade and really use this legal status that we're going to gain later in the year to boost sales. We're already in 30 markets across the globe, and we're looking to expand. Okay,
Morag, thank you very much indeed. And as someone who loves whiskey, good luck with it all. Right, okay, coming up on Business Live in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be focusing on Germany as it prepares to go to the polls. We'll be looking at what's at stake for Europe's biggest economy. Stay tuned.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky Berlin.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash.
Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes. Sky News, the full story first. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
This is insane. This was a bustling residential area.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world, the likes of Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Sir Elton John. We try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
This is the Game Changer seat.
Look, it even comes with binoculars. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Very welcome back. Now, voters go to the polls in Germany this weekend for an election which has been described as one of the most important for decades. Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his government face being voted out of office following a campaign that's been dominated by Ukraine, energy prices and, most importantly, immigration, which many have said has led to the rise of the far right. Let's speak to Catherine Nice, Chief European Economist at PGIM Fixed Income. Catherine, very good morning to you. My first question is, what has been surprising, given the malaise, if you like, in the German economy for years now, is that it's not necessarily dominated this election, even those TV debates?
I think the economics has been important a part of this debate, but clearly it's part of a wider structural cyclical challenges that are facing the German economy just now.
And what are those challenges?
Well, as you said, Germany essentially hasn't been growing since the pandemic. It's completely moved sideways, the economy there. And this is very unusual because in the period before the pandemic, Germany was growing on average about 2%. So really this stagnation that we're seeing in the last couple of years in Germany, it is very different to what people will have in their minds in terms of recent experience and is creating big problems for policymakers there in terms of really needing to put through some reforms.
And when we talk about this, some of that has been down clearly to energy, hasn't it? We know, for example, it was very exposed when the Ukraine war happened because it had closed its nuclear power stations and it was very reliant on Russia, and then that suddenly ended. What also have been the pressures on Germany? It's a big manufacturing nation, just not being able to sell as many cars, for example.
Well, the German business model that worked so fantastically well for so many decades was really showing signs of strain. You know, well before the pandemic, you saw German industrial production really start to be on a trend decline around 2017, around that time. And I think really what's happened is that the pandemic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, these shocks have really just accelerated that trend. But that business model was already showing its strains. And I think, you know, it's just been accelerated. And now it's pretty clear that the economy needs some major structural reforms to find a new way forward. And the prospect of this election is that, you know, there is an opportunity now for a reset. I think the big question is going to be, coming out of this election, are you going to see a German government that is going to have a sufficient mandate to really push through some of these important reforms so that they can move forward?
Yeah, indeed, because we're almost certainly looking at a coalition irrespective of what happens. Though Friedrich Merz from the CDU is likely to be the next chancellor, isn't he? He's well ahead in the polls. But it is the CDU that is, in many ways, or has traditionally been the biggest backer of the debt brake, if you like, in Germany. Are we likely to see movement on that? Many feel that that debt brake has constrained German governments in the past.
Absolutely. This was a big reason why, you know, things really couldn't move forward in terms of a political perspective in all of 2024 and what I think everyone is hoping for, looking for in 2025. What I would say is there is, I think, quite a widespread political agreement and consensus now that this debt brake does need to be reformed. So I think we can be reasonably high conviction that coming out of this election that we will see some sort of a debt brake reform. I think even failing that, if for whatever reason there are not the parliamentary numbers to do that, we can see increased spending in Germany through other avenues. I think the big question, though, is it's a matter of degree. Are we talking about incrementalism here, just a little bit more spending here and there, or are we really talking about a decisive step change in terms of defense, industrial strategy, reforms in Germany? And I think that is where there's probably a bit more skepticism that we're going to see that.
Yeah, I read the other day that the trains now are on time more in Britain than they are in Germany, and that I think on average a German takes 20 sick days a year off. So there possibly does need to be some big changes. Just finally, Catherine, in the context of this, Germany's been the engine of the European economy for decades. It's clearly in a difficult position, as is France. But that's not to say that Europe's all on the same page. We're seeing strong growth in places like Spain, Greece, Ireland. It is a mixed picture overall.
Absolutely, and I think you're making a fantastic point. We are seeing a multi-speed Europe, and a lot of the growth that is happening in Europe is not in the core. It's not where we've typically seen it in the past. It is in these more peripheral economies. Spain, for example, is doing fantastically well. Greece is doing very, very well. Portugal. And you put all those countries together, and they are really what is contributing to what little of Euro area growth that we see. They are the main drivers of it. But of course, you know, Germany is just so big. As it's the largest economy in the Eurozone. France is also, you know, extremely large. And so if you put those two together, you know, that is sort of, you know, showing up in the average numbers and pulling it down and pointing to that weak picture.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. It's almost as if the world has reversed since the financial crisis, with the pigs now doing incredibly well and Northern Europe not so well. Thank you very much indeed, Catherine Nice, there on those German elections. And of course, we will have full coverage of those German elections throughout Sunday here on Sky News. The result expected Sunday evening, but there will be months of negotiations, almost certainly, to actually form a government. That's it from me this morning. I'm back at 4:30 this afternoon. Leah's up next with the rest of the headlines. I'll see you later. Goodbye.